Hi, Sven here. Today, I have something really cool again. I have built a make automation that allows me to automatically generate an entire presentation just by entering a single sentence with headings, texts, and even automatically generated matching images. And the whole thing even works with Google Sheets and Google Slides. So with free products, unlike some other tools you might use for this, which also cost extra money. I'll show you exactly how it works step by step in this video. And if you follow these steps, you can completely recreate it yourself. I'm Sven, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been involved with quality and process optimization for over 30 years. Not just professionally, but in all areas of life. And much of what I can do today, I learned through trial and error, so I know what really works. Today, I run a group of companies with several software firms, and in my videos, I want to show you how you can use automation and AI profitably and effectively in your own business. So let's get started. First, I'll give you an overview of the scenario, and then we'll dive into the details. So the whole thing starts with a webhook, and if you've used Make before, then you know that this module generates a kind of web address and basically waits at this address until a signal comes in, and then the scenario starts running. Then I read this idea, this one sentence from the Google Sheet. Then we use ChatGPT to generate the headlines, the texts, but also the prompts for the images. Then we create a slideshow from a template. Then I need a few details for that. Why? We'll see later. And at this point, we still don't know how many slides we want. And that's why in this gray highlighted area, there's a loop that runs as many times as I have slides. Specifically, we generate an image for each slide. We then create each slide from a template slide and replace the placeholders in that slide. As I said, how this works will be explained in detail later. And at the end, I delete this slide, this template slide, and then I insert the link into the Google Sheets. Yeah, so actually it's not all that extensive, but there are a few tricky things in there that you just need to know. The whole thing then starts with this webhook. That means I copy this address here and use it in my Google Sheet. Let me make this a bit bigger. So, and here in column C, I've added a link. And this link contains exactly that webhook. And when I open it now, Make also needs to know which row I actually want to use. That means which information that I've entered here should Make actually process. And that's why I add using the question mark, which means the parameters start know a parameter that I've arbitrarily called row. And with this row function, which actually provides the row number, I then pass this information on to Make. That means if I click here, then in this case, row 2 will be passed on, and in the next case, row 3, and then Make can get started accordingly. So since I'm also a pizza baker, by the way, one idea could be, how do I bake a perfect Neapolitan pizza? So, and how many slides do we want to have? Let's say 6. And if we then go into the scenario afterwards and let it run, what happens then? I receive this sentence and the number of slides via this webhook. And then I go here into this Google slide. I selected this ID here. And then I specify which sheet it is. It's the presentations sheet and the range I need. So from column A to column B. And then with this row number, that means if I passed row 2, it would say A2, B2 here. That means basically it would return exactly those 2 cells as the result. Yes. And otherwise, the fact that there's a header in there is also important information. Then I have this text, and now I go into my ChatGPT here and say, okay, what do we need? We use Furo as the model. Then we say, what is your role? You are a marketer who creates a presentation with images from an idea. And then the user's role. There I have now entered the task, namely based on the idea, which is the value in column A, the following content that will be used for presentation, X headlines. So I'll stick with 6 for now. 6 headlines for the slides, 6 text for the slides, 6 prompts for the AI image generator to visualize the headline and the text as a photo. That means it should then actually be visualized accordingly. Yes. And then I've written a few specific constraints here as well. Headlines. A maximum of 3 words. The text should be 20 to 30 words, written simply, directly, and in a human way with short sentences. And because it's supposed to generate 3 things: title, text, and prompt, I use a JSON document as the response. And the JSON document basically looks like this. Here you have the slides, that is the number of slides. Then comes a square bracket so that I have an array here. And within the array, I have each time the title, the text, and the image prompt. And down here, I also have a description of what makes a good answer, namely that the user or reader should be made curious, want to look at the slides, and the texts should tell the idea I entered as a story. And specifically in such a way that the entire story comes across in these 6 steps. Yes. And then it's also very important that I set JSON objects as the response format down here. Otherwise, it won't come out correct. And with the pass JSON response, I then get the whole thing in a readable structure. So that means everything has now been generated here. And now we use the function create a presentation from template. And what am I doing here? First, I say, okay, it should be named after the first 25 characters of the idea. And then I add the current date at the end. It's located on the shared drive, specifically in the BPA shared drive. Then in this folder that I've selected here, and the only thing I can do when creating this slide right now is set the title. What does this template look like? Let's take a look here. I've done it in a very basic way. I have a cover page with a photo as the background, and then I have this placeholder for the title. And in Google Slides, if you use these double curly brackets with text in between, then this title in this specific case is recognized as a placeholder. That means when creating the presentation, I can replace this placeholder with a text. And on the second slide, this is done in a very basic way. I just left it blank. I have a headline here. I have some text, and I also have some text here. But as we'll see in a moment, I can actually replace it with an image. And that's the cool thing about it, that I don't have to mess around with objects here, but I can actually use these text templates directly. And what happens now in the automation, if I say 6 slides, then this template here will be copied 6 times. And then the corresponding texts and images will be inserted into these placeholders. So how does the whole thing work? So if I say create a presentation here, I could now just type something into image, headline, and text, and I'd already be done. That means if I only have 1 slide, or for example, always have 4 fixed slides, then I could do it directly here and wouldn't have to do much else. But as we know, at the beginning, when I define the slideshow, we don't know the length yet. So create slideshow, and then I need the presentation details here. That means it's just a function that does nothing other than give me all the details, all the technical content details of this newly created slideshow. We'll need those in a moment. So, and then as already mentioned, we use the iterator here to go over the number of slides that we want to generate. That means when I call this here, then it gives me from JGPT this array with the text and the slides. And then I use Flux to also create the images. How Flux works, I've shown that in another video as well. You can check that out up here, but just briefly. So we're using the API from Flux. I have my API key in here, and then we write the prompt here, which in my specific case gets called 6 times through the loop. With the width and the height, we have to be a bit careful, because if you look into the API documentation, you'll see that the width and height can be a maximum of 1440. I want to have landscape format, so 16 by 9. If I calculate 1440 in a 16:9 ratio, then I get 810 for the height. But 810 can't be divided by 32, and that would cause an error. So I have to use 800 here to make it work. Yes, and the output format is JPEG. Then I wait 15 seconds because I know that Flux generates an image in about 10 seconds. Then I fetch the image from here. And now we come to the exciting step, namely we create a new slide. I'll skip this point for now. I need to explain it afterwards. And it works as follows. I use the create a slide from a template slide function. And if we take a look at this function, then I use this presentation again, and I'll get to that in a moment. And now if I copy this slide here as so, headline, text, and image in, that's the moment when during the copying, when creating this slide, I can actually replace these contents, namely the headline and text. With the generated text, I simply do that by saying this thing is called headline. It also has these curly brackets, which are already included there. I replace it with title and text. I replace with text. The problem is, though, I can't replace the image with the image generated here. And for that, I need, in a further step, this function replace text by image. And if we call that up and take a look at it now, then it works in a similar way again. I have the presentation. Then I can say here, upload an image by replacing a text tag. And what is this text tag called? It's actually called image at first, and then I use the URL here that I got from Flux. But now I have the following problem. I have the word image both in the template and in the copy. And if I just use it like this, it would replace the image on both slides. And then with the next copy, I'd have a problem because I wouldn't have that placeholder anymore. And that's why I need to use a little trick here. And this trick is that I replace the word image in this tag here in the copy with image 1, then with image 2, image 3, and so on. But that in turn has the problem that I can't replace a placeholder with curly brackets with another placeholder with curly brackets, because that just doesn't work. And that's why I had to use a little trick here. And this trick works as follows. I create another placeholder, which I call less, then image, and then the number here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then greater than. And with this replace function, I can now use this regular expression to replace the less than sign with the opening curly brace and the greater than sign with the closing curly brace. If I type this in by hand, it simply doesn't work. That's why I actually have to write it into a variable first. And I can then use this variable in the create new slide function. That means I now replace the word image with image 1, image 2, image 3, and so on. And now, in the next step, I can replace this image 1, 2, 3, 4 with the URL. And that's the only way I managed to do it. Maybe you have a better idea of how to do it differently, but I was really happy that it actually worked this way. And with this create new slide, there's also another parameter, namely slide index page number. So at which position should this copy that I made of the slide actually be inserted? And now let's go back into this create new slide again. Up here, I also have a function that tells me which slide I actually want to copy. And now you have to look at the whole thing as follows. If I have this function get presentation details, then I have an array here called slides, like this one. And within this array, I now have all the slides, and what I need is this object ID. That means With this function, I have to precisely identify which slide I actually want to copy. And the slide that I copy is exactly the one that has this object ID. And I find it by using the map function. That means I map this complex array to a simple array with the object IDs. And then I take the second one. And with that, I find this slide. Okay. So it's all a bit complicated, but if you follow it step by step, it will work for you too. I'm pretty sure about that. Yes. And last but not least, once the loop is finished, we want to delete this template slide at the end. That's the same function as before. And finally, I add the link to the Google Sheet by simply using docs google.com presentation D and then the presentation ID. And then we're done. Okay, so let's just go ahead and run the whole thing. I can do that by clicking on Run Once here. And then I go to my Google Sheet. And I've already entered that here. How do I bake the perfect Neapolitan pizza? I would like 6 slides. Then I start the whole thing, click on this webhook, redirecting, accepted. So that means it should already be running here. Yes, we can see it. So the Google Sheet has already been read and the texts and prompts have also been created. And now a copy of the slide template is being made. Then I get the details and now this iterator starts running and goes through the process of creating the images, replacing the texts and so on 6 times. And now I'll just pause until that's finished. The 6th image has just been generated and then at the end the template slide is deleted and the link is entered into our Google Sheet. So let's go over to the Google Sheet and yes, indeed, there's a link in here. Let's click on it. And when we open it now, we can already see how do I bake a perfect Neapolitan pizza. That was the title we entered. And now let's take a look at the slides. Prepare the dough, flour, water, yeast, salt, let it rest, prepare the sauce. Yes, wonderful. So, and now you can, of course, imagine that if you want these slides with a special background, or maybe you don't want any text on them at all, just images, then basically you can have the presentation put together in any way you like. If you want to learn more about these kinds of automations, then maybe check out the content marketing video that I'm linking here. There you'll see a whole bunch of other tasks that I can solve with Make. All right, have fun with it and see you next time. Bye.